well, quintets, did they exist with Haydn? I mean, the way they did with Mozart, or?
Not really. This is actually a really important kind of simple low-hanging fruit observation, is Mozart's Clarinet Quintet is sort of, actually not sort of, I'm pretty sure it's the first of its kind.
Really?
String quartet plus clarinet. This is at least the first standard piece of repertoire for that ensemble that we see. And Haydn also, very little extended ensemble writing, sort of like, orchestral pieces. But in the world of chamber music, he wrote a lot of string quartets. He wrote quite a few piano trios, some string trios. And then you have Mozart, who's playing around with these extended ensembles. Like, he writes a couple of viola quintets, string quartet plus viola. He writes a couple of piano quartets, like we talked about last year, which is...
Piano quartets or piano quintets?
Quartets.
Okay.
So
okay.
String trio plus piano. So he's taking these typified ensembles that Haydn was kind of defining in a way, or giving credibility, then he starts to extend them in creative fashions.
Do you think this was possibly because of the requirements? Like, he had somebody who wanted to play something, so I'm just gonna, I'll just put all of them together. I mean, do you think it was by necessity in some ways, just because of his work?
It could have been that there was
Maybe.
like a lucrative paycheck involved with some of these pieces.
Right.
In the case of this Clarinet Quintet, he had a good friend who played the clarinet and said, hey, I'd love to, play some music of yours. Which, by the way, is how most music comes to be these days, too. You have someone who, you're like, yeah, I'd love to write for you. Okay. And that's how the Clarinet Quintet came to be. There's also a famous trio for piano, cello, and clarinet, I believe, the Kagelstadt. I might have that instrumentation slightly wrong, but also written for this very same clarinetist. And that's an ensemble that we had not seen before that point. So Mozart really is starting to, make additions to standard ensembles in a creative way.
Or just moving the pieces on the board a little more.
Yeah.
I mean, the board was always there. It was just, he had occasion to do it.
Yeah, it's like making an enriched dough. Like, what
Yes.
happens if we add a little sugar to the sourdough?
Put some cinnamon on top.
Yeah, like, ooh, that's different and nice.
Nuts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like bacon muffins. And
Exactly. No, it makes sense to me, because just by virtue of the musician pool that he could work with. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe Haydn didn't have as many musicians to even choose from. Maybe that was a possibility as well. Because
could be. I don't know a lot about the exact musicians.
well, I'm not judging, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I think though Haydn really, if I'm putting myself into his shoes, he's dealing with having to establish instrumental styles, or
Right.
he's chosen to. He doesn't have to. He's also dealing with new kind of philosophical ideas that he's kind of expected or inspired to put into music. So he's got a lot that he's having to build from scratch. And I feel like kind of what he chose to do was land on some ensembles, instrumentations that he really wanted to develop. And then develop those very in depth as a means of establishing this new kind of artistic paradigm. And then you have Mozart, who, kind of inherits that new higher baseline of philosophical thinking from Haydn, and now he kind of has the freedom to invest in this place and say, all right, Haydn established the symphony orchestra, he established the string quartet as standard, and okay, now I can kind of expand that bubble a little bit.
Right.
And that's not to say he's not thinking in an artistically inventive way at all, but it might be one way to think of the different hands they were dealt.
I kind of imagine Mozart being the kind of musician who wouldn't have placed a lot of constraints on himself. I mean, I know I saw Amadeus, as many people did, but he did want to use German when Italian was the standard language for opera.
Right.
And he didn't seem to have a problem with this.
No.
So it's like, it was almost as if he just imagined what he thought was going to work, and he's like, okay, we're going to do it. And so he didn't have quite so much there was a boundary of everything, but he was able to say, oh, but this is going to be fine.
And again, think about Beethoven.
Right.
This is what we talk about with Beethoven. Mozart's already thinking that way.
Right.
Right. Beethoven is inheriting these thought processes And and Beethoven does
Oh.
deserve to be credited as the one who pushes us into somewhere completely new. But it's not all him. It's not just him. And by context, we tend to think of Mozart and Haydn as being almost sterilized or simpler or something, but like absolutely not.
Oh no! I mean, there are some Mozart pieces I've heard, and I'm like, where did that come from? I'm like, what the heck is that? And I mean, not that it was that much of a surprise, but sometimes it is.
It is. It's
and
completely.
Just like, where did he get this?
Yeah.
I think I kind of understand what you're saying. I mean, two things I'll say. We don't know what would have happened if Mozart had lived longer.
Right.
Like Buddy Holly with the Beatles, people say.
True. Schubert, same way too.
Yes, started to always go into my own contemporary music history, but not, the classical part. And Mozart was also, I mean, I think of it like technology today. I'm sure, just like with any field, people are like inspiring each other in ways they don't always know.
Right.
Like even with technology today, like, oh, now we've got cell phones. When we didn't, the first computers were occupying a room as big as this, and now they're like this tiny. And it's like I can see that they're all sort of like feeding off of each other, maybe even just through the ether, and they don't even know it.
Right, and right, it's like innovation. Like talking about it in this way, it sounds more like a technological innovation than it does artistic development.
But it's the same thing.
Exactly.
It's the same. It moves the same way. It exists in that way, is what I'm thinking. So I get what you're saying. We're not trying to give credit to only one person. We know they were all involved, and they might be up there debating while we're talking.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Or saying, wait a minute.
You're completely wrong. We're speculating.
9, right?
Yeah. But it's like the context of later composers can always seem to make earlier composers seem conservative.
Right.
Even when in their time they were the opposite of that. And I think that's kind of Beethoven syndrome with regards to Haydn and Mozart. It's like, no, these guys were, and many of their contemporaries were off the chain.
Well, I think our listeners know, and I'm sure they know, we're not trying to shortchange anybody.
No.
We're just, as you said, some of it's speculative. I mean, we have, but it's just these are pieces we can sort of put together, and the puzzle isn't complete.
Yeah.
But we can sort of make some reasonable guesses about things.
Exactly.
So I know the clarinet piece that I know that Mozart did that probably most people are most familiar with is the concerto, the one that he did, which is, I believe, chronologically after this one, it was like 6 something or whatever.
I believe so. I'm not sure.
But obviously, this clarinet piece was done, I think, before that. So is there anything special about it?
I mean, aside from the fact that it exists, right? Like
because it's a new incarnation.
Right. And I think Mozart sort of understood how intriguing what he was doing was, because the piece begins as a string quartet, which I think is fascinating.
It doesn't, yeah, I see that.
The clarinet sits at, right, like, and put yourself in those shoes. You're sitting there in 1779. Can I just point out, only 17 years later than this Haydn quartet, the classical period was very compact. And that's why I feel strongly that we can call it a transitional period, is because, like, it stands on its own, but holy cow, things move fast, right?
Well, with Mozart and Haydn involved, they would.
It would, right.
I mean,
then
Mozart was just like pumping
boom, 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 boom,
I mean,
and then Beethoven throws us over the edge.
An acceleration there, yes.
It was very fast. But yeah, I mean, put yourselves in the salon or wherever that you're going to hear this played, and then a string quartet rolls up with this clarinetist.
Right, in tow.
They all walk on stage and everybody's... The clarinetist is confused. It's a quartet concert.
What is he doing on stage?
Right, what is he doing there? And then the string quartet begins to play the first 6 bars of this piece, and everybody's still like, yeah, he's lost. The clarinetist just came on at the wrong time.
And then, he was supposed to be with everyone else.
Yeah, right. And then the string quartet plays this beautiful phrase, and then... And then finally the sheet is sort of drawn off the clarinetist. And
I see.
It's just this beautiful, subtle nod to the fact that he's unveiling something brand new.
So would they have not been familiar with the concerti model? I mean, the concerto model? I mean, would they have, isn't this sort of like a mini
They would have.
concerto kind of idea?
You know, in a way, and there are certainly moments where the the clarinet, because obviously because it's the unique addition to the ensemble, where the clarinet is absolutely center stage, spotlight, freaking out on it, super virtuosic, and you're right. There's definitely some concerto DNA in there.
That's what I was thinking, because it sort of just feels like that.
Yeah.
The structure, there's a little intro, and then because I've heard enough piano concerti that I know that that's very similar. He just couldn't bring the whole orchestra up.
Right.
He was just gonna. He was just doing a little mini version.
It's kind of a hybrid genre.
Right. So that's not. That's kind of neat that Mozart might have done something for him. It was a little more spare.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is, you mentioned the concerto sense of the clarinet getting an opportunity to show off. But we also kind of see it in the way the phrases are structured.
Okay.
Like in concerto playing, especially in the late Baroque, which again, remember, is not that long ago, we have this thing called ritornello form, where you have the soloist would play something, or maybe the ensemble would play it first, and then the soloist would get to do it. And then the ensemble would show off for a hot sec, and then the soloist. It's this sort of hot potato kind of structure. Mm-hmm. And we see some of that here, where the string quartet will do a thing, clarinetist gets an opportunity to show off, and then the string quartet will transitionalize us or something like that. And then of course there are also plenty of places where they're a homogenized ensemble. But I think you're right, there are influences of how do we structure an ensemble with sort of a outsider voice. Mm-hmm. Like you can't ignore the way that concerto worked.
Well, I'm sure Mozart was also mindful of, distributing the spotlight appropriately
to his friends.
With his friends, and
right.
to the quartet. He was probably trying not to, ruffle any feathers.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's fine that it's a little bit more of a, I wouldn't say predictable, but it's an altered recipe. Yeah. But it's a familiar recipe to some degree.
Yeah. And I think the thread of familiarity between Haydn and Mozart that I would encourage listeners to kind of think about, or maybe keep in the back of your mind, mm-hmm. is, they were composing using melodies, mm-hmm. Like themes. That's how many of the forms were structured. I also like to think in terms of topics. So a topic being a perhaps more granular piece of information in the music that the composer might develop or reuse, or appears as like a thread in multiple themes or melodies, mm-hmm. or something in the development that is kind of celebrated as a point of like improvisation for the composer, like a topic. And so I think the beginning of the Mozart quintet is actually a perfect example of that. That the string quartet, there are a couple topics based in there. There's that downward arpeggio with the scale built into it. That sounds sort of like these descending fourth, right? So like the harmony of it is pretty distinctive, the way it kind of in parallel moves downwards. The rhythm of it is fairly distinctive, that we have long, 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 short, 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 long, long. Uh-huh. And then the contour of the thing could also be a topic. Down, up, down. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a mystery when we first hear something, which of these pieces of information are going to turn into topics for the composer.
Right.
And then as you listen, and if you're aware of all these different pieces of information that could be developed, you can hear them flash out in future moments, and it makes the music sound unified. Like structurally, that's why they were doing this. But it also really gives you anchor points to listen. We're like, okay, I recognize that gesture from the opening, for example. Or I recognize that kind of tonality. And you could sit there and analyze your harmonies and look for what gets reused, but it really is an intuitive thing. I think that everybody can hear is this sense of, oh yeah, there's this weird harmony turn. I don't know what it is, but I recognize it. And I think that's a really fun way to listen to both Haydn and Mozart. They're fascinated by these little microbes of information, these topics, and then they develop it.
And it's always amazing how many topics they can get from just, a handful of notes on a keyboard.
100%. And that's, like 4 measures of music, and I was just like, well, that could be a topic, that could be a topic, that could be a topic, that could be, and the possibilities are kind of infinite.
Mm-hmm. That's funny because when you were singing it, you were singing it, I recognize it. I must have heard this before at some point.
It's beautiful. I think it appeared in like a film soundtrack recently as like some diegetic music.
Well, I'm not watching any recent film soundtracks, but it's very likely.
Yeah.
Since that's obviously something I've spoken about.
Yeah,
I'll be checking that out. But I mean, just itself. I mean, when you say the da 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 da,
and then look, then the clarinet's entrance. Da 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 da. Do you recognize that topic already? That arpeggio. Take a look at those intervals.
Well, it's just the reverse.
Exactly.
Of the other one, yes.
Right. So the string quartet, dee da dee da. I'm a trained singer. And then, right? And then we get this little trail off, and then the clarinetist comes in and sort of unwinds what the quartet did. We get a quicker rhythm, but it's the same interval content.
Sorry to laugh at your little comment.
I
mean, I may not have demonstrated it where people would believe it, but I'm actually a trained singer, so that was why I was laughing.
Oh, are you really? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So you're sitting
here
just dying inside while I
No.
scream
I
these
was
melodies
just,
at you.
I just wasn't like, in performance mode, but yes.
Yeah. And then, so in, what is that, bar 7, we have the unwound topic of the first 2 measures of the piece. Mm-hmm. Now take a look at the 3rd measure of the piece. Do-do-dee-da. Mm-hmm. Now take a look at the 2nd measure the clarinet plays. How does that?
It's just expanded, but it still has that
it's
progression.
It's a rhythmically compressed and sort of mirror image of that exact same contour.
So that almost makes it seem formulaic. Do you think Mozart was really formulaic?
I don't think it was formulaic.
Well, you know what I mean, though.
Yeah, I think he was formulaic in the same way that like a really skilled wood craftsman is formulaic, in the sense that like they've got their workshop of tools, but the real craftsmanship is in like when you choose to use what tool. I say that as having never done any wood crafting.
Perhaps I should use a different adjective. It was probably more improvisational. Is that better?
I think maybe at the core of this kind of classical period of music, I think some of the best stuff in this time is stuff that sounds like it could have been improvised, like a genius improvisation of some kind, and it has that topical unity, and even if you don't realize it, it's there. You can tell.
It reminds me of one of the first pieces I played of Mozart, when I was a little more advanced, the very famous one that's like, the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Oh, the variations. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Because that actually taught me a lot about how he thought about what he was doing. So that was why I was thinking, it was just, that was why I guess I came up with the adjective formulaic, because it's something he's done before.
Yes, it's
that's
a pattern.
that's probably but it's a pattern, but I'm sure he's doing more exciting things with it, because I don't know everything he's written.
Well, and actually that is the perfect example I hadn't even thought of this sort of topic-based organic composing, is the theme and variations.
Yes.
Where like there's no mystery to anybody that everything in this piece is going to be derived or inspired by this tune. Right.
Yes.
And so that
this
is
topic.
Yeah, that is your like case study in motivic economy. There's your buzzword for the day.
Motivic economy.
And one of my professors in college, Michael Rose, he probably won't see this, but if he does, he's going to lose his mind.
You mean
motivic economy. But I love that term. It's economical use of motives, topics, melodies. It's economical.
Okay.
Yet infinite somehow.
Yes.